Hi there guys, it's Aaron here from Console Deals, back again with another on-camera video. I hope everybody watching from the UK had a nice bank holiday weekend. I certainly did, as you can probably tell from the incredibly obvious tan line left by the watch on my skin. I am very pasty, I will admit. But no, I'm happy and excited to talk to you today because we're talking about something really unique, especially for the channel, in that we're not talking about accessories, we're not even talking about games in and of themselves actually, but rather we're going to be tackling the equally interesting, exciting topic of books, because I'm not sure if you were aware, but over the past couple of weeks we've had the release of several notable industry related books, namely Press Reset, Ruin and Recovery in the Video Game Industry by Jason Schreier, obviously, you know, renowned video games reporter. I think he's working over at Bloomberg there now after a previously, you know, quite sizable stint over at Kotaku, which you would have heard of. And then the other book is Ask Iwata, which is kind of this compilation hardback that kind of, it compiles loads of columns together written by the former and obviously recently deceased Nintendo president Iwata himself. But no, I thought I'd talk to you about these books. I've been reading them for the past couple of weeks now. I've had Press Reset in particular for a long while, so why don't we start there? So Press Reset ostensibly promises to be a deep dive into the reasons why developers tend to leave big companies, whether that's through layoffs, whether that's through the need to be creative, or just generally, for their own mental health. And if that's one of the positives and, benefits of reading Press Reset, I would say it is to gain further insight into the reasons why making video games is, one, a hard process, but two, it obviously lends a voice and kind of like an image to the people actually behind the games that we play, which isn't something we really think about. Whenever we read articles on websites or, play the games themselves, whether that be on PC or console, we're generally only interacting with the art as it's been produced and released. And we don't really tend to think about the kind of creatives, the artists, writers, programmers and developers responsible for presenting us with that art. We obviously get, we tend to hear about them in a negative light, particularly, these companies and their higher ups. So CD Projekt Red being a most recent example, with their release of Cyberpunk 2077. Obviously that company, that was a developer that was all over the news, but while it's quite easy to lambast and kind of be disappointed with the handling of that game and aim it at the entirety of CD Projekt Red, Press Reset is an example of, no matter how unfinished a game might appear on the surface by the time that we get to play it, hundreds, if not thousands of people have worked effortlessly, trying to get that game made, and, they put in all the work and effort they were needed to, and it's just unfortunate that in this case, in cases like Cyberpunk, it's not come out trumps. So this is something, obviously, that Schreier delved into before with his previous book, which I believe was called Blood, Sweat and Pixels. I have it back there on my shelf somewhere. But whereas that was kind of a series of 10 or so essays that kind of delved into the actual making of a game, ranging from indie titles like Stardew Valley all the way up to big games like, the still unreleased Star Wars 1313, Press Reset takes a bit more of a human look at the people behind making these games and some of the reasons why they might choose to leave or sort of recover or kind of take a break from the development of, these big, huge tentpole AAA games. So some of the games being discussed in this latest book, some of the interviewees that Schreier was able to get is nothing short of remarkable. So we dive into without trying to give away too much, we dive into the making of BioShock Infinite. That features heavily. It has its own chapter, and obviously there's a high chance that you would have heard of Ken Levine, who is of course the creative director behind both BioShock 1 and BioShock Infinite. But what Schreier's book does is it gives you a better sense of how the people below Ken were feeling about working on the project and kind of, what were some of the pitfalls in development? How does Ken's leadership kind of affect the morale of the team over at Irrational Games, which is now unfortunately obviously defunct as well? Seems to be a reoccurring theme throughout Press Reset, but 90% of the time this book does a good job at illustrating not only the challenges of video game development, but also, how one can get past those challenges and sometimes, not always, but sometimes find themselves in a better position, get through those challenges, and come out in a better position than they were before. So one of the big surprises for me, how the book kicks off, it talks about the making of Epic Mickey, a game which I'll hold my hands up, I still haven't played as it was a Wii exclusive. And they kind of talk about how Warren Spector, you know, despite being, you know, a legendary video game developer famous for games like Deus Ex, even someone like him, someone of his caliber, kind of struggled to get a game made and had to sort of compromise by taking work where it happened. And like, how do you keep, you know, multiple teams of multiple people employed and in safe work whilst trying to pursue your own creative endeavors? And another way that Press Reset sort of differs from Blood, Sweat and Pixels is that it's kind of like a one long overarching sort of narrative, even though it's obviously all true stories delivered by various interviewees that were actually there and actually worked for these companies. It doesn't feel as isolated as Blood, Sweat and Pixels did. Whereas Blood, Sweat and Pixels, you could have like, you know, flicked through the page, kind of found a chapter, and then enjoyed like a, you know, start or finish story about how a game was made anytime you wanted. This is very much more, you've got to make a bit more of an investment, but I would very much say that Press Reset does a very, very excellent job at demonstrating the trials and tribulations of what it means to work for a developer, both at an indie level as well as AAA. So enough about Press Reset. The second book, obviously unfortunately couldn't show you Press Reset because I got sent a digital copy, but the fine folks over at Viz did send me a hardback physical review version of Ask Iwata, which is the next book I'll be talking about. So this book I would describe more so as a coffee table book, in that, you know, it was never intended to be released as kind of like a singular product. Obviously Iwata unfortunately passed away in 2015, but you know, leading up to that, during his time as Nintendo president, he wrote various columns for various websites and magazines, and that's kind of what's been translated here. And he'll dive into things sort of relating to leadership, as well as his origins, when he first got a job into programming at a company you may have heard of called HAL Laboratories, or Laboratories, however you want to say it. And you kind of gain a better insight into the mind of the head of a video game platform holder, which is something we rarely ever dive into, especially someone who was at the helm for so long like Iwata. And the reason that this book is really good, and the reason I call it more coffee table book, is that it's quite short, only 150 pages, and even then the type of the words themselves are quite big, so it's very easy to just pick up, read a chapter, put it back down, and even then within the various, I think there's 7 chapters themselves, you can kind of just pick it up, read a passage, there'll be a new header, and you get some really interesting food for thought about how Nintendo was run pretty much up until 2015, when Iwata unfortunately passed away. So yeah, I would say that if you've got, you know, an interest in sort of like some of the decisions behind Nintendo's, you know, movements leading up until around about the Wii U and the beginnings of the Nintendo Switch, kind of like when that was starting to move in, Ask Iwata is kind of, you know, essential reading for you, and it will not take you that long. Miyamoto has his own dedicated chapter towards the back of the book where he discusses, you know, kind of his thoughts about working with the man who he describes as not a boss but a friend, which is obviously very sweet. There is this kind of like through line of melancholy while reading the book, because the more you get into it, the more you realize that this was a guy who genuinely cared about people and, you know, wanted to do what was best for them in terms of like making work as fun and less sort of like grindy and, you know, as possible, really. So you read this and you think, oh, it's such a shame that this unfortunate man was taken too soon and is no longer with us, but he kind of leaves behind a legacy which is something to be inspired by, you know. And one of the most insightful takeaways I took away from this book is that, you know, he wasn't employed at Nintendo until he was kind of 33. So, you know, most people would say he's not really a young man by that point, but he was still able to, you know, make an impact and kind of build an empire and take this company from strength to strength, even at that age. Because, you know, I'm someone now, I'm in my late 20s, and I'm kind of thinking, you know, where have I got to go from here? I've got all this pressure. And I think if you're a young person into games that doesn't quite know what you want to do with your life, even you will take away something from this excellent book, Ask Iwata. It doesn't take you very long, guys, and it's one of the best video game books I've ever read. Sure, read a lot of them. I would say it's, you know, it's almost impossible to kind of compare Ask Iwata and Press Reset together. I would say if you can, please pick them both up, because they both demonstrate, you know, sides and stories from within the game industry that we wouldn't typically see. So anyway, guys, thank you very much for just, listening to my rambling thoughts about these random video game books. But like I said, both released within the past month or so. Ask Iwata only just came out, press reset, I believe, a couple of weeks ago. And if you've got a room in your sort of like free time, if you've got space to kind of, dedicate to a book on your favorite subject, either of these will scratch that particular itch. So, like I said, thank you very much for watching, guys. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We got lots of exciting things coming up. Plenty more accessory reviews coming in the pipeline, as well as video game reviews and, of course, listicles, which you guys just cannot seem to get enough of. But until next time, thank you very much for watching and happy gaming!